Hi, this is Mark Birch, and this is a quick revision of Macbeth Act 3, Scenes 3 and 4. Scene 3 is a really short scene, but it's really crucial dramatically as this is the first murder that takes place on stage. Unlike the murder of Duncan, the audience witnesses this betrayal of Macbeth's best friend, and the full horror of what he's initiated is evident to the audience. It's also typical of the representation of Banquet that his first thought upon recognising the treachery is the safety of his son. He shouts, "Fly, good Fleance." Once again, this would potentially flatter the vanity of James I, given that James I traces lineage back to Banquet. Scene 4's the banquet scene, and until this scene, Macbeth's been able to disguise his actions, attempting to look like the innocent flower and adopt a false face. But at this point he loses control, and he loses it very publicly, exposing his guilt. Macbeth presents himself as a generous and a genial host, telling the guests not to stand upon ceremony but to seat themselves, rather than waiting for him to sit down before they could take their own seats. He says that he will play the humble host, which might imply that he's going to go round and charge the glasses of the lords that are assembled, essentially giving the sense through all of this that he's humble. It's worth noting that Macbeth and Lady Macbeth use the word welcome 3 times in the first 8 lines of the scene, really trying to ensure that they're getting the lords on side. They know they've got a battle to face because suspicion rests on their shoulders. But it's this kind of attempt at graciousness that makes what happens subsequently even more shocking. When talking to one of the returning murderers, an antithetical parallelism is used to joke that Banquo's blood is better thee without than he within, so therefore better on the murderer's face than in Banquo's body. It's the fact that there is this wordplay, there's such a conspicuous play on words through the antithesis that suggests that there's a pleasure that Macbeth receives upon hearing this kind of news. Upon hearing Fleance has escaped, Macbeth says, "Then comes my fit again. I had else been perfect," which could be a reference to Act 3, Scene 1, when he talks about Banquo making him sickly in his life, which in his death were perfect. So the repetition of that key lexical term, perfect, creates that connection. He said he would have been whole as the marble, founded as the rock, as broad and general as the casing air, if both Fleance and Banquo were killed. And those similes provide a sense of how secure Macbeth's position and mental state would have been in that situation. There would have been a freedom because he wouldn't have been troubled by the potential threats to his kingship that the witches had proposed through Banquo's lineage. In contrast to the freedom that he would have experienced if Fleance and Banquo were dead, he now feels confined by the knowledge of Fleance's freedom. Words from the semantic field of imprisonment are employed, and you have this harsh alliteration coupled with the consonants of plosive sounds that complement that sense of an horrific state of fear that Macbeth now finds himself in. The nature of Banquo's murder is recalled, and the horror of it is evident in the murderer's claim that the gashes in Banquo's head were as deep as trenches, with each one sufficient to kill him. We then return once again to the motif of snakes. Thanks for that. There the grown serpent lies. The worm that's fled hath nature that in time will venom breed, no teeth for the present. So we have Banquo represented as the fully grown snake, with Fleance the young snake or worm that will in time grow its venomous teeth. So Macbeth's referring to the danger posed by the young Fleance. In time he will grow and he will seek revenge. This is alluding back to Act 3, Scene 2, with scotched the snake, not killed it. It's one of the threats that Macbeth was alluding to in Act 3, Scene 2. When Macbeth first sees the ghost, his initial response is, "Which of you have done this?" Interestingly symptomatic of Macbeth's suspicious nature and familiarity with deceit, because his immediate belief is that one of the lords is playing a trick on him, trying to deceive him. But the horror of the ghost's appearance is clearly evident in the adjectival choice, gory, the gory locks. With Macbeth's loss of control, Lady Macbeth tries to step up and regain control, blaming Macbeth's outburst on a mental illness from childhood in order to reassure the lords. When she addresses Macbeth, once again, she tries to control him through the same method that she used in Act 1, Scene 7, questioning his manhood. The echoes of Act 1, Scene 7 are maintained with Macbeth's response, "Aye, and a bold one that dare look on that which might appall the devil." In Act 1, Scene 7, he said, "I dare do all that may become a man." So once again, it's the same response to the same kind of accusation. Lady Macbeth mocks Macbeth's visions, saying, "This is the very painting of your fear." The representation of painting is something illusory, something unreal. It's a representation of something. And it seems to be a link to Act 2, Scene 2, where we have the sleeping and the dead are but as pictures. She makes a comparison to the air-drawn dagger. The very fact that she suggests that this is similar to the air-drawn dagger could actually give credence to the idea that the dagger was previously something that was born out of the supernatural rather than the heat-oppressed brain, because we now as an audience are likely to have seen the ghost of Banquet. Also, she said that this would well become a woman's story at a winter's fire, authorised by her grandam. So again, she's mocking his bravery, claiming that his fears are as pathetic as those found in a woman's story that her grandmother found suitable. In other words, really childish and not likely to disturb anyone. Mocking Macbeth's manhood and bravery were the tools that she used to persuade Macbeth to kill Duncan, but now they're not working. Macbeth doesn't pay attention to his wife, instead focusing his attention on the ghost, as you would. But he uses this conditional to express his horror at death. If charnel houses and our graves must send those that we bury back, our monuments shall be the moors of kites. It's a concern that if graves and buildings that would be used to store bones send the bodies back, as appears to have happened with Banquet, then he postulates that the monuments for the dead will be nothing more than the stomachs of those birds that feed off the dead. He's haunted by the idea that the dead are not staying dead, hence why they end up in the stomachs of birds of prey. This point's reinforced by his description of the times of the past when the brains were out, a man would die, and there an end. But now they rise again with 20 mortal murders on their crowns, a reference to those 20 trench-like gashes that are supposed to be in the head of Banquet. This is showing his horror of what he's witnessing, that dysphomism of when the brains were out, really capturing the visceral nature of what he's witnessing and the horror of it. The bravery that defined Macbeth in Act 1, Scene 2, Brave Macbeth, well he deserves that name, has been questioned by Lady Macbeth earlier in the play, and yet now he seems to be trying to convince himself of his own bravery in the face of this threat by a supernatural force. He says that no enemy would make him afraid, no physical enemy, a bear, a rhino, a tiger, or living man, but you cannot fight this unreal form, and therefore that's why the fear exists. He justifies it as a rational fear. This particular aspect of the speech begins with, "What man dare I dare?" echoing again that line from Act 1, Scene 7, "I dare do all that may become a man," once again reassuring himself of his bravery. The line's a form of parallelism, and the effect of it is to ensure that the generality of man is also transferred across to the singularity of I. In other words, anything that any man would do, he would dare to do. With the departure of the ghosts, Macbeth begins to doubt the nature of their existence, with the question, can such things be? And this might remind us of Act 1, Scene 3, when Banquet, with the departure of the witches, questioned, were such things here, as we do speak about? The simile, like a summer's cloud, could convey the strangeness and the brevity of the ghostly vision. One wouldn't expect to see a cloud on a summer's day, just as one wouldn't expect to see Banquet's ghost, and also it comes and goes very quickly, just as Banquet's ghost has come and gone very quickly. Macbeth draws a contrast between the response of Lady Macbeth and his own response to witnessing the ghost. Having believed that Lady Macbeth had also witnessed the ghost's appearance, he questions his own bravery, really, believing that she can have seen the ghost and yet kept the ruby of her cheeks, in other words, stayed red in the face, rather than being blanched by fear and turned white as he was. With Macbeth's loss of power, Lady Macbeth once again has to take control, ordering the lords to leave at once. And it's interesting that when she does so, she says, "Stand not upon the order of your going, but go at once." It's interesting structurally that the scene began with Macbeth's words saying, "You know your own degrees, sit down." a recognition that there would be a clear hierarchy and people would sit according to that hierarchy. Now, Lady Macbeth doesn't give a damn about the hierarchy. Stand not upon the order of your going. Just get out. She's trying to engage in damage limitation, and there's a sense of desperation here. Another intertextual link can be seen in Macbeth's phrase, "It will have blood," they say. Blood will have blood. It seems to be reminiscent of Macbeth's concerns in Act 1, Scene 7. "We but teach bloody instructions, which, being taught, return to plague the inventor." In other words, what we do is going to come back to haunt us. And here that's happening very literally in the return of Banquet after Macbeth's had him murdered. Macbeth's paranoia is evident in him worrying that his secret's going to be disclosed by aspects of nature. The magpies, rooks, even the stones that have been known to move and trees to speak. And once again, this could be another intertextual link, because just before Macbeth committed the murder, he was worried that the very stones prate of my whereabouts. Rather than being sought out by the witches, Macbeth now states that he's going to seek them out. This reversal echoes as well the way in which all of the concerns that Macbeth exhibited earlier in the play, all of the goodness seems to have disappeared, and now is acting purely on self-interest. "For mine own good, all causes shall give way." He also says, "I'm in blood stepped in so far that should I wade no more, returning were as tedious as go o'er." This metaphor illustrating that there's no turning back. He's gone so far, he's killed so many, he's steeped in blood so deeply that it would be as bad to go back as it is to go on. So he may as well go on, he may as well see this through. In Act 1, Scene 7, Macbeth really thought about what he was intending to do. There was an awful lot of procrastination, to the point where he convinced himself of the error of killing Duncan. That's all, again, disappeared. He says here, "Strange things I have in head that will to hand, which must be acted ere they can be scanned." This seems to be a declaration of acting without thinking. This is, as soon as he thinks he's going to do something, he's going to act impulsively. There will be no checks of conscience, no checks of guilt. There will be no rationality applied to it. He's just going to do whatever he wants to do. And the scene almost concludes with reference to the motif of sleep. We have this ironic foreshadowing because we know that sleep's going to become significant in terms of Lady Macbeth. You lack the season of all nature's sleep, and at the end of the play she lacks that as well, as her disturbed mind forces her to sleepwalk. It's also worth recognising that this links back again to Act 2, Scene 2. Sleep was discussed by Macbeth as the balm of hurt minds, great nature's second course, chief nourisher in life's feast. And he's denied this. There's a sense of him being driven to madness because of his lack of sleep, and that sleep is a result of the guilt that's been produced by the regicide. And finally, Macbeth says, "My strange and self-abuse is the initiate fear that wants hard use." This seems to be a recognition on his part that the ghost of Banquo was an illusion brought about by his fear. Something that the audience would likely find difficult to accept given that they'd also witnessed it. Macbeth seems to be engaging in a capacity for self-delusion. It seems to support Lady Macbeth's claim that it was just like the air-drawn dagger that Macbeth previously considered to come from the heat-oppressed brain. Okay, ta.